All right, guys, let's want to welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. CFP National Championship game in the books. Michigan 34-13. Harbaugh gets the job done. Great three-year run the Wolverines have been on, and they finally reached the pinnacle of college football. I remember many years ago, Nick, it's almost been a decade now since they hired Jim Harbaugh, being from the state, seeing how, the structure of this program is just completely deteriorated before he got there and where it was even in his early years, and just how surreal it was for him to get hired there, getting Jim Harbaugh, this great head coach who had success at the NFL, coming back to his alma mater to restore this program. He's finally did it, Nick. Obviously, there's been plenty of controversy and whatnot, but there's no joke about this football team. They're incredibly good. They've developed in key areas, offensive line, defensive line. Five-star recruits like Donovan Edwards and J.J. McCarthy have helped lead the way for Michigan. What do you think this means for Harbaugh in this program? Because, again, it was so surreal so many years ago, and it drifted, downwards year after year. For them to be here seems impossible, improbable, but they've done it 15-0.
It's incredible what has happened at Michigan. When they lost to Appalachian State in 2007 to kick off the year, losing to an FCS team, Division I AA, that loss really seemed to set Michigan back. It felt like 30, 40, 50 years. That was a brutal loss. They had so many star players, ranked number 5 in the AP poll, Chad Henne, Mike Hart, Jake Long. They had so many guys who returned with the, hopes of chasing a national championship after falling short in 2006, losing to Ohio State, in a high-profile game. That was 1-2 matchup. Lloyd Carr retires. Rich Rodriguez steps in. 2 years of absolute disaster. Brady Hoke there for 3 years. 3 more bad years. And then they make this move and they grab Jim Harbaugh, who, of course, had an incredible legacy as a quarterback at Michigan. He played there, was a star for 3 years, ended up in the NFL for some time. He had a great reputation at the college game, coaching at Stanford, right? He really turned around a program that also really lacked that sort of recent history and built them into a winner. He makes the jump to the NFL, a rare success story for a college coach in the pros. You don't really see that in this day and age. Then he jumps back to the college level. It was a slow start at first, but then he has success again and finds the way to get the job done, capping it off here with a national championship about 10 years into this reign. It's extremely impressive across the board. It really is a fantastic legacy for a guy, like you said, who grew up in the area and played for the Wolverines. He returns to campus and leads them to the promised land after falling short 2 straight years in a row with bad losses in the playoffs to Georgia and TCU. This is a storybook ending, certainly for the Michigan Wolverines.
Now, looking at the actual game and how they got it done, we'll start with this Washington offense. I previewed this game. I alluded to that Ohio State game a couple years back. C.J. Stroud, 3 first-round pass catchers, and I was like, that was a big probably, tape they're going to watch for game prep, considering they gave up some yards, sure, but they didn't give up any big plays at all. And I figured that was going to be a big key in this contest. And that's what Michigan was able to do. They gave up one play of 20-plus passing, a 44-yarder to Odunze on a coverage bust. They had a few of them they weren't able to hook up with, but that's it. Only one 20-plus yard completion. And that's pretty much the carbon copy of that Ohio State game back in Columbus a couple years back, or in Ann Arbor, that is. In the secondary, they played it perfectly. Jesse Minter really had these guys in tune. The safeties had a great game. They obviously have 4 different guys that rotate back there. Rod Moore, Makari Page, Keon Sabb. These guys were phenomenal. They were able to hold up when sending pressure. I knew this was going to be a chess match, and I was very interested to see how that play out. Michigan won it every time. They weren't able to create one-on-one matchups. The Huskies, that is. They did lots of work underneath, right? They had a nice, diverse set of screens that led to some big plays for this offense to at least, pick up first downs. Washington, they missed lots of big plays. And in that fourth quarter, the pressure really just took over. They were unable to really hold it up. And for the most part, they did a solid job of keeping Penix protected. He ended the game, though, incredibly bruised and battered. Overall for Penix, though, coming off a red-hot performance against Texas, one of the best we've seen all year, comes out here, not great. 255 yards, a touchdown, 2 picks, lots of missed throws, a lot of high balls, inaccuracies as well. This was just a disaster for performance overall, Nick. As the game went on, they were only down 7. This defense was able to keep them in the contest, and the more it went on, the worse Penix got, it seemed.
Penix seemed to pick the worst game possible to have a bad day. I think the one thing that was really interesting is that they seemed to abandon their play style. That one play where he hit Odunze for that 40-yard 40-yard plus on the coverage bust. They lined up two players on that right side, Odunze and McMillan. They confused the defense. McMillan cuts into the left. Odunze gets left on a coverage bust, basically by himself there. The safety pulls and tries to follow McMillan across the middle of the field, and that leaves a wide open coverage bust for Odunze. That's the sort of play that you want to draw up if you're the Washington Huskies here. They did not draw that up at all at night. They had the one also as well that was brought back for a holding. Those are only two times I saw them really kind of draw up those sort of style of plays where they put the two talented wide receivers on the right side and have some motion there, try to throw the defense off and pull that safety towards the middle of the field to give Odunze that one-on-one on the outside where he is so dominant and such a talented wide receiver. They seem rattled throughout the game. Penix 27 of 51, so they certainly attempted to throw the ball a whole lot here, but he only had an average of 5 yards per attempt. One touchdown, the two picks there. The picks, obviously the second one was not a great throw, throwing into what looked like quadruple coverage. The first throw, unlucky there. I think the offensive player could have made maybe a better defensive play, trying to knock the ball out of the player who intercepted its hands on the sideline. Just a great grab, though, by him to kill some momentum that Washington had in the second half. Their offense just looked rattled. They were uncomfortable. 46 yards rushing. We knew they'd have some troubles with Dylan Johnson being hurt, but 46 yards rushing on 20 attempts is just really not good enough for this offense, and it really threw off that kind of balance that they used successfully at times. Penix looked uncomfortable. He got hit a few times. A lot of false starts, pre-snap penalties that certainly set this team behind the chains and caused some problems for this offense.
Yes, certainly. They weren't able to generate the same spacing they typically do. And again, the safeties just played a great game overall. Will Johnson, Josh Wallace outside, they really held up for the most part. This is, a receiving core. They love the big, deep ball. They're very physical on the outside, and they just weren't able to generate that. And like you said, the rushing attack, clearly Dylan Johnson hobbled was just big for them. I mean, he probably would have had double the yardage if he was a little bit more healthier. And obviously, this is a team that typically needs to run for about 100 yards per game to really be where they want to be in terms of offense. Just a disaster for Washington. Obviously, a lot of credit goes to the Michigan defense. But, again, there's just a lot of missed opportunities, it seemed, for Washington. Just kind of a disaster of a game. Like you said, worst opportunity, or worst time, that is, to have a bad game. And we'll go ahead and look at the other side of the ball. Obviously, they got off to a hot start. They quickly had 200 rushing yards. About less than 20 minutes into this game, I believe they had topped that mark running the football. Yards before contact, I mean, they were not touching them for, really at all. Donovan Edwards, 6 carries, 104, 2 scores in that first quarter, 2 long rushing touchdowns. Corum had a long 59-yard run. He ended up with 134, 6 yards per carry. Both backs had 2 touchdowns each. They both had 100-plus rushing. Second half, Nick, they really collapsed this running game. There were some big-time adjustments there. Washington, they showed a lot of simulated pressures, also did better in slanting gaps, pre-snap shifts from their defensive line. The linebackers playing pretty well after that. Still, though, at the end of the day, 303 rushing yards for Michigan. You got to really appreciate the Huskies. They really showed up in terms of physicality in that second half, Nick, and they were getting absolutely blown out of the water in that first quarter. After that, they really locked down, and, they pretty much held Michigan out of the end zone the rest of this game, other than that big drive in the fourth quarter, and then, of course, the pick that really set them up for an easy score there. I mean, just a poor start, really, for the Husky defense. They're playing catch-up the entire time, but, I mean, considering how the first quarter went, they locked down. They kept them in this football game at the end of the day.
I don't think 303, yards given up is a true representation of this defense. Like you said, they really made great adjustments in the second quarter and third quarter, especially. They were very physical there. They seemed, Braylon Trice had a better game in those quarters, getting in there in the backfield. It was really those 2 big breaks early on for Edwards. I didn't have Edwards on my bingo card scoring 2 touchdowns on the ground today. Edwards had a quiet year, really didn't look like himself. He breaks out 2 straight, large carries there to get him in that range to score those touchdowns. 46 yards is his longest, 104 on 6 carries, 17.3 average. So Edwards obviously having a fantastic day. Corum, a great day for him as well. We expected Corum to have a pretty solid day. I was impressed with the Washington defense on the ground. It's tough to say that when they gave up 303 yards, but I don't think that's an accurate representation of this defense. They made adjustments when they needed to, and this game could have easily been a blowout. Michigan was up 14-3 at the end of the first. They were looking physically dominant and looked like they really had great control over this game. But Washington tightened up, and they made this a contest here. We avoided a blowout, and this was a great game going into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and you look at what they were able to accomplish on third down. Obviously, Washington, they were 2 of 14 on offense, but 1 for 10 for Michigan on third down. I mean, what this defense was able to do was terrific. And I think the last 3 games of the year from this secondary, they're like 122nd passing yards coming to this game. Last 3 games, they were so good. They held Bo Nix and Oregon in check. They had a 75-yarder that really boosted the stats for Nix. Texas, they couldn't find anything in terms of yards after catch or big plays until really that fourth quarter when they're just trying to survive. and that's really when they started getting things going through the air. And then here again, they didn't give up much at all. There's one play, I think it was in that first quarter, off of play action where the safety got cut coming downhill. They got behind him, and then that play on Colston Loveland there in the fourth quarter really kind of sealed the deal for this offense as they were able to cruise to a 2-score lead. That was really it. 140 yards from McCarthy, 10 of 18. He had a big run at one point on a third down that really had them backed up. I think it was that 22-yarder. That was obviously a big play because they really could have flipped field there, the Huskies. McCarthy, though, really wasn't a great game, Nick. Certainly a guy had plenty of misfires. I don't know what the count was, but he had a certain amount of incompletions in a row. On third down, he certainly wasn't great either. And this is a quarterback certainly who's been a pretty good system player for this offense. J.J. McCarthy, though, being blessed with a great offensive line and a great run game, Nick.
McCarthy did not have the greatest day, 10 of 18, 147.8 yards per attempt, 0 touchdowns, 0 picks, 31 yards on the ground as well. McCarthy did not really impress me a whole lot there. This passing attack has been shaky all year. McCarthy has been shaky in the second half of the year. That's probably why he's ranked as the 6th quarterback in most people's boards heading into this draft year. He just sort of struggles in those big game moments, it seems. Had a good game, a serviceable game, and the running game was able to get the job done. The defense also stood up, but McCarthy did not wow me in this national championship game. I really was not impressed.
Yeah, overall, this was a good national championship game. Washington held in there for the most part of this contest. I got some people trying to say Georgia would have made it more competitive. This was a competitive game, Nick. Early, no, it didn't look like it would be for Washington to be able to, flip momentum and settle in was highly impressive, especially with their ailing offense. I thought this was a good national championship game, and that's how it goes. They were able to outscore 14-0 in the fourth quarter. What was it, 10 minutes to go. This was still a ball game, still a one-score contest. And certainly getting plenty of disrespect. This is a defense that showed they can compete with anybody in the country. Yeah, they gave up 300-plus rushing, but like you said, it's not really an accurate representation of the entire body of work, as a lot of that really did come in the first quarter. In a couple of minutes, the offense for Washington, though, they just got shut down by a better defense. They would still score on pretty much any defense in the country, though. This was a Washington football team that was very good, earned their spot in this national title game. Kalen DeBoer has a great group here. Plenty of guys are going to be playing on Sundays. I certainly hope that the respect is shown to the Huskies.
Yeah, I think Georgia fans need to really just take a back seat on this one. They're really loud on social media tonight saying that they deserve to be here. Well, they played scared in the SEC title game. They had the opportunity to go out and win the SEC and play in the playoff, but they played scared, and Nick Saban and Alabama beat Georgia. Georgia did not get snubbed in any regard here. I think that Michigan and Washington were two deserving teams, both unbeaten entering this matchup. Washington, played a whole lot better than TCU did in the national title game last year. This is a very competitive game down to about the 10-minute mark, like you said, in the fourth quarter. So anyone trying to discredit Washington, again, you got to look at the body that worked for Washington. They beat Oregon twice this year, including in a neutral site in Las Vegas with a very pro-Oregon crowd. Overall, they were a very dominant team, top to bottom here. I really think that they were very impressive, and the body of work was fantastic for the Huskies. So to discount this team in any way, it's just pure disrespect for the last Pac-12 champion ever.
Yep, last Pac-12 champion indeed. This is a good football team. Michael Penix certainly needs to keep his head up. Great career he had. Certainly a poor game from him, though. Michigan, though, lynching the national championship game. Jim Harbaugh gets this team in the right direction, likely headed to the NFL, leaving this team at the top of college football. Another great season in the book, Nick. We had a great time this season breaking down these games. Didn't get them all right, got this one wrong. For the most part, we had a blast doing this, and I know a lot of people certainly appreciated our analysis, especially a lot of the color you added this season.
It was a lot of fun. This was a great season doing this full time and getting kind of in the groove here. I worked a lot last year in the pod with you, but this was 1 year where we worked together the full season, did a lot of picks, a lot of weekly analysis. We're going to head into the off season, have some NFL draft coverage, off season headlines, talk about coaching changes, things of that nature, and then get into the previews in the spring. I can't wait to get to that. It's tough when the off season comes. No more college football until August, but counting down the days to that opening weekend.
Michigan's like, comment, subscribe. Plenty of content coming out this off season. Congratulations to Michigan.
I think that was pretty solid. I think that was pretty